elected. He was put into office given the great faith of the people who voted him in.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
And if we look at the great presidents of the United States, there's one unifying thing. They maintained the continuity in how the Constitution was upheld and defended.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
At first, it was mostly just political name-calling and insults, suggesting Donald Trump was a lunatic.
This man is a pathological liar.
Guarantee I have a vocabulary better than all of them. Most of them, I know I have an IQ better than all of them.
I'm very highly educated. I know words. I have the best words. But there's no better words than stupid.
I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
But more recently, the conversation about the president's mental state has taken a more serious tone.
I can't explain this crazy behavior, but I can call it crazy.
We've taken this big, beautiful ship, and it's being turned around very quickly.
I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but the guy needs therapy.
USA! USA! I am the chosen one.
And while almost everyone seems to have an opinion, could Donald Trump be unfit for office?
Good evening. Thank you guys for coming. I know our first official press briefing is going to be on Monday, but I wanted to give you a few updates on the president's activities. But before I get to the news of the day, I think I'd like to discuss a little bit of the coverage of the past 24 hours. Yesterday, at a time when our nation and the world was watching the peaceful transition of power, some members of the media were engaged in deliberately false reporting. Photographs of the inaugural proceedings were intentionally framed in a way, in one particular tweet, to minimize the enormous support that had gathered on the National Mall. No one had numbers. This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe. Even the New York Times printed a photograph.
Why put him out there for the very first time and utter a falsehood? Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office on day one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts? Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
My name's George Conway. I'm a lawyer. I'm a litigator. I principally practice securities litigation. I've argued appeals, including a big case in the Supreme Court. My wife was Donald Trump's campaign manager and now his counselor to the president.
And he said a lot about this since.
I was a Republican since probably about 1980 when Ronald Reagan was elected president. I voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and I almost took a job in the Justice Department myself to run the civil division of the Department of Justice. Donald Trump wasn't my first choice among the Republican nominees, but I was hopeful that he would calm down and get better as time went on. He started to show a little more discipline. He would only go off the rails every third day instead of every day. But the problem was, once he got into the supreme position of power, he lost some of his incentive to be disciplined. And I'm thinking at this point in time, what is wrong with him? Donald Trump is like a practical joke that got out of hand. That's the problem. I didn't go into the administration for a lot of reasons, but the fundamental reason was it was a mess. I guess I must have been Googling Trump and mental health, because I clearly thought there's something seriously wrong with him. And I came across an article in Rolling Stone magazine, is Trump a malignant narcissist? And a number of people like Dr. Gartner were interviewed. And as soon as I read that, I realized, oh, that's it. You cannot understand his presidency without knowing this.
My name is John Gartner. I'm a psychologist. I taught in the Department of Psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University for 28 years. I've written some books, and I'm the founder of Duty to Warn, an organization of mental health professionals that believe that Donald Trump should be removed because he's psychologically unfit.
My name is Lance Dotis. I'm a psychiatrist and a psychoanalyst. I've spent most of my research career looking at compulsive and addictive behavior. And I've become interested in the importance of psychology and politics in recent years because of the threat to our country.
My name is Justin Frank, a psychoanalyst and a psychiatrist. I've been in practice in D.C. for about 40 years. Is Donald Trump fit to serve as the president and commander-in-chief? I can answer that with one word: no. Trump is a sociopath, a sadist, a con artist, a racist, a misogynist, a sexist in general. And I think it is a problem.
How dare liberals, people on the left, try to undo democracy by accusing a president of being mentally ill without any basis? Look, these psychiatrists now who are trying to diagnose without ever having met the man.
This is not the first time the left has gone at Republicans. They did the same thing to Barry Goldwater. They did the same thing to Ronald Reagan.
Over 1,000 psychiatrists diagnosed Barry Goldwater and said he was mentally ill. They were then rebuked by the American Psychiatric Association and said, do not make diagnoses without seeing the patient. And they continue to do it today.
The election campaign's in full swing in New Hampshire, bellwether state of the nation, that goes to the polls on March 10th. And growing support for Goldwater.
So the Goldwater rule has an interesting history. In 1964, Barry Goldwater ran for president, and a now defunct magazine, Fact Magazine, did a survey of psychiatrists and published an article saying psychiatrists think that Goldwater is unfit. Goldwater sued them, and he won. And as it turns out, actually, he deserved to win. It was libelous. He was not unstable. And the psychiatrists who wrote those statements about Goldwater, it's important for people to understand the history of our field. This was in the 60s when Freudian psychiatry really ruled the roost.
This is what I've discovered. We are constantly bedeviled by powerful unconscious forces in our beings.
And so their explanations were things like, he's a latent homosexual. He's been scarred by his potty training. He has an unresolved Oedipus complex.
Based on unconscious hate of his own father, caused by childhood jealousy.
Freudian psychiatry, though it has many important and positive aspects and helped move the profession forward, it's not been used well in terms of its analyzing public figures. I actually interviewed the last living member of the ethics committee that formed the Goldwater rule, and he said these were obviously wild speculations. They weren't founded in fact, and so they embarrassed the profession because they were really idle speculations. And so that's why they passed that rule. He said to me, we never intended it to be a gag order, meaning that psychiatrists could never speak up about public figures. We just didn't want them making unfounded statements.
The Goldwater rule today has been incorrectly extended. And the incorrect part about it is that it now is being used to suppress speech about things that are knowable. It's as nonsensical as saying an orthopedic surgeon shouldn't be able to watch somebody in a football injury and say that person probably has an ACL tear. He can say it because he's an expert in the field. Something happened, he observed it.
And what people need to understand is that actually the psychiatric interview is the least reliable method of making a diagnosis, because our current diagnostic system, the DSM, is based on observable behavioral criteria. Well, when you meet with someone, they can lie to you. So they can say, oh, I never did that, or I don't do that. But if you could actually observe their behavior, if you could follow them around, if you could watch them on TV, if you could read their social media, if you could talk to all their significant others, you'd probably get a much more reliable indicator of how they behave.
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
I am more confident in my diagnosis of Donald Trump than any diagnosis I've ever made before because I have more information.
By outward appearance, you're 10 years older than you were a year ago.
Some weariness has bit at my bones.
It's not true that having any kind of mental health disorder would make someone a bad president. One of my favorite books is a book called Lincoln's Melancholy, about how Lincoln's being a depressive personality is part of what allowed him to win the Civil War. He had a capacity to endure mental suffering that was baked in to who he was. And so the enormous burden of the Civil War was something he was actually able to endure.
I have seen what's happened in this last 4 years when, in my state, when people lose their jobs, there's a good chance I'll know them by their names.
Bill Clinton. I wrote a biography of Bill Clinton about how his hypomania was part of what energized him in terms of his charisma and his creativity, and it also had to do with his impulse control problems and his hypersexuality, so it was a double-edged sword. But it doesn't disqualify someone from being president if they have a psychological disorder. But Donald Trump shows clear signs of the most severe personality disorder. It's called malignant narcissism, and it was first introduced by Erich Fromm, who escaped the Nazis and spent a lot of his life trying to understand the psychology of evil. And he formulated this diagnosis of malignant narcissism, which has 4 components: narcissism, paranoia, antisocial personality disorder, and sadism. I think everybody knows Donald Trump's a narcissist by now.
I will be the greatest jobs producer that God ever created.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me.
Who are you consulting with consistently so that you're ready on day one?
I'm speaking with myself, number one, because I have a very good brain.
But it's the other 3 components that make him truly dangerous. Because many politicians are narcissistic, but he's also paranoid. So all of his crazy conspiracy theories.
The state of Hawaii released my official long-form birth certificate.
The birth certificate was produced in 2011. You continued to tell the story and question the president's legitimacy in 2012, 13, 14, 15.
Yeah. How about this one about Ted Cruz's father?
His father was with Lee Harvey Oswald prior to Oswald's being shot, and nobody even brings it up.
And his sense of being a victim.
Mr. Trump turned his sights on Google, tweeting, "They have it rigged for me and others so that almost all stories and news is bad."
And his demonization of anyone who disagrees with him.
Nasty guy. Now I know why he doesn't have one endorsement from any of his colleagues.
All right, John, I get to respond.
Pick from the buffet there.
He's a nasty guy.
These are all signs of a paranoid process. Antisocial personality disorder, or what used to be called psychopathy or sociopathy. It's constant lying. Well, he's the most documented liar in human history, I think, at this point. It's violating the rights of other people and exploiting other people. So sexual assault would be violating the rights of other people. Not paying your bills or defrauding people through Trump University would be an example of exploiting other people. And it's breaking laws and breaking norms. Well, he's broken every norm of the presidency. That's one of the reasons he's so out of control. There are certain norms we thought no one would ever break. But it's part of his personality disorder to break norms and to break laws. And it's a lack of remorse. He has no guilt or anxiety about the destructive things that he does.
Impeachment for that? It was beautiful. It was just a perfect conversation.
And the 4th component that Erich Fromm identified is sadism. Truly taking pleasure in harming, humiliating, and degrading other human beings. If you read his tweets, I wrote an introduction to a book about his tweets. I had to read thousands of his tweets, and they literally made me ill because it was just one vicious attack on and humiliating insult after another. It's like, how can someone even come up with thousands of vicious things to say about so many people? But he enjoys degrading and humiliating and insulting other people.
I do think that we have enough evidence that most psychiatrists would feel like it's important to warn about Trump. We have a duty to warn.
Psychologists and really all mental health professionals have the duty to protect society if there's a risk to society.
So the Tarasov case was in the 1970s. A patient said to a psychologist, I'm going to go home and murder my girlfriend. The psychologist didn't warn the potential victim, and the patient went home and killed the girlfriend. And it's now the law in all 50 states that if you are aware that a patient might be a danger to someone, confidentiality goes out the window. And confidentiality is one of our core values, but it's more important to warn someone who could be harmed than it is to maintain even our core value of confidentiality. Trump is not my patient. He's not saying I'm going to go kill my girlfriend. But the number of people who are at risk, the number of people who could be harmed isn't one person. It's hundreds of millions of people. So if we didn't speak up, that would be the immorality. What annoys me about the Goldwater rule, the way it's being interpreted now, is it's being interpreted as if we are being unethical by speaking out and warning the public. When in fact, I ask this question: to whom will history be kinder? Those who spoke up during the age when Trump rose, or those who were silent?
I want the cleanest water on earth. I want the cleanest air on earth. And that's what we're doing. And I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that. I have done more environmental impact statements probably than anybody that's, I guess I can say definitely, because I've done many, many, many of them. More than anybody that's ever been president or vice president or anything even close to president. And I think I know more about the environment than most people.
Gaslighting is a crucial tool of abusive personalities. It is lying to someone in a way that makes them doubt their own perception of reality.
I'm Dr. Ramani Durvasula. I'm a professor of psychology. It's an interesting place where the origin of this term gaslight came from. It came from what was a play in the 30s and then became a film called Gaslight. And it was about a man who was slowly trying to drive his wife mad.
A moment ago, the gas dimmed, as it does when someone turns on another light in the house. Did you turn on another light, Elizabeth? No, ma'am. There's no one in the house but us.
The gas lights kept getting turned up and down, and he was denying having done it.
You're going to see a doctor, madam.
No.
More than one doctor tomorrow morning.
Very common sorts of gaslighting statements are things like, it never happened that way, you must be losing your mind. They'll literally say things happened that didn't happen. I didn't do that, I didn't say that. Many people call gaslighting a form of emotional abuse because what you're really doing is setting out to confuse another person. When you confuse someone like that, you really do almost render them more vulnerable to you and actually easier to coerce because now they don't really know which way is up. It's as though you've sort of turned gravity off and turned them upside down.
I don't know if you remember the point where Trump said, listen, don't pay attention to what you're seeing. Don't pay attention to what you're hearing.
What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
And it's interesting because as human beings, we're actually vulnerable to this. There's a famous experiment in social psychology called the Asch experiment. The Asch experiment is they show lines on a screen. One is clearly longer than the other. And they ask someone which line is longer. And they get it correct 100% of the time.
That's two.
Then you bring in 4 Confederates who work for the experimenter, but you pretend they're also in the study as subjects. And they all say that the shorter line is longer.
3. 3. 3. 3.
50% of the time, the person will reverse themselves and say, you're right, the shorter line is the longer one. We're very subject to the influence, our reality testing is very subject to the influence of social pressures. So when he does these things that are blatantly destructive and disordered, and yet people act as if they're normal and they poo-poo these observations, eventually we begin to question ourselves and think, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's actually is normal.
What has been so disturbing is that we've discovered, at least some of us, that it's much quicker to demolish a building than to build one. And Trump understands that. And I think he can demolish a lot of our faith as a nation in our institutions. He can demolish the effectiveness of institutions. He can certainly psychologically confuse and gaslight people like nobody's business.
Thank you very much. I said during the transition, I'll say it up here, I think there's been at times a disconnect between the way we see the president and how much we love the president and the way some of you perhaps see the president. And I certainly see the American people probably see the president the way I do. But we want to get that message out there. And to use a Wall Street expression, there might be an arbitrage spread between how well we are doing and how well some of you guys think we're doing. And we're going to work hard to close that spread.
My name's Anthony Scaramucci. I spent 11 days in the White House as the president's communications director. Trump is wickedly smart. The guy made it to the American presidency. He's not stupid. You can hate Trump because he says asshole-ish things, okay? And he's an obnoxious guy at times. But what you're missing is that he's now a reflection of the cultural zeitgeist. He's an avatar of that anger. So when he's lighting people up on Twitter, it's a very large group of people in the United States that are actually giggling, and they enjoy it.
What are your earliest memories of Donald Trump?
My earliest memories of Donald Trump are actually 1983. During the Christmas season, I visited the Trump Tower.
The Trump Tower, when it's completed, will be $400 million worth of high-priced apartments, commercial space, and boutiques.
What's happened is phenomenal. I've never seen anything to the extent that I have in New York. It now, from a real estate standpoint, has probably become the hottest city in the world.
That building was a brand new building in the center of New York, and there was a lot of publicity and fanfare. It's got brass and a ton of pink marble, and it's a modern structure. And he did a great job marketing it. He sold out the condominiums, and he built for himself a triplex, which literally looks like Louis XIV smoked crystal meth and then decorated it for him. I mean, it's like ridiculous. Walking into his office, he had a ton of pictures of himself on the wall, a ton of magazine covers and all that sort of stuff. I read The Art of the Deal when I was in law school when it first came out, and I said, okay, this guy's got it going on.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the author of this book right here, Trump, The Art of the Deal, Donald Trump. At the beginning of the show, I said you either love him or you hate him. Now, do you find that that's true, or does everybody love you, or does everybody hate you?
No, most people love me, and a few really have great distaste for me, David.
And why is it that those people, that few, would not care for you? Because you're so successful?
I can't imagine. No, I don't think so. It's just I sort of speak my mind a little bit like you in that respect.
Yeah.
A little bit like you.
A little bit like me.
Not too much, hopefully.
What were you like as a kid?
Very normal in a lot of respects, but a very, very solid child.
He grew up in Queens. His father was making good money as he was being raised. He built a lot of lower middle income housing on the border of Brooklyn and Queens.
Fred Trump was a successful businessman. He made a lot of money, and he was smart at what he did. However, Fred Trump was a dishonest, crooked guy who stole from the federal government, who wouldn't allow black people to move into his apartments. His father said, you've got to be a killer, you've got to be king, you've got to be tough, and he took that in.
Is what you do something you've always wanted to do? I know your father was and still is a real estate developer.
My father was in the real estate business, and I've been in that and other businesses and different things. I like what I'm doing. I just enjoy what I'm doing. I love the real estate business. I learned a lot from my father. More than anything else, I learned a lot.
He wanted to make a name for himself, and he believed early on in his career that having a lot of publicity and a lot of profile was going to be good for the sales and marketing of his apartment buildings and condominiums and things that he was doing, but he also wanted to have a unique celebrity persona, and so Howard Stern represented that for him.
You once said that the best way to treat a woman is to treat her like duty.
No, I never said that. But
You never did?
It was attributed to me.
So you never did say that?
No, I never said that, but it was attributed to me.
I see. So you treat women with respect?
I can't say that either.
All right, good, all right. Somewhere in between.
I do. I treat women with great respect.
Treat women somewhere in between respect and do-do.
My initial impressions of Donald Trump, like everybody else, I was starstruck. Back then, speaking about women that way, it was more the norm.
Where's Marla go?
I think we have to put Marla right up here.
Come on, let's do that. Let's take down Frederique.
I went to a fundraiser right after Ivana and Donald divorced. So I was excited that he was there. I went up to him and I said, hello, I'm a huge Howard Stern fan and I wanted to introduce myself. And he said, why would I speak to you when there's so many beautiful women here? I wouldn't even let you suck my dick.
One of the problems here is that Donald Trump doesn't have empathy. And that's not a modest statement. He literally has no empathy. He does not feel emotions like care and
He's a sociopath?
Well, as I've said since 2016 in The New Yorker when he started to run for president, yes, he is a sociopath. There is no question. He's a sociopath, meaning he neither has a conscience nor does he have a heart.
You make it sound like Blade Runner when they go to the replicant. The replicant knows you've found him out. He doesn't feel anything. Anyway.
He doesn't feel anything.
Empathy is a normal human trait. It's actually normal in all mammals. It starts in childhood with a parent and a child, and it continues throughout society. It's what glues people together instead of just fighting against each other. Almost everybody has empathy, but not everybody. People who don't have empathy are the people that we call sociopaths or psychopaths.
That sounds like a very destructive business philosophy.
They often were treated cruelly. They were treated without empathy themselves.
You talk in your book about getting even, the importance of getting even. Is revenge sweet?
I believe strongly in getting even. If somebody has hurt you, if somebody's gone out of their way to hurt you, I think that if you have the opportunity, you should certainly go out of your way to do a number of them. And I've had more criticism about that one statement in my book than any other statement. The clergy is called, the ministers, the priests, the rabbis. They've all said, what a terrible thing to say. That's against our teachings. I just believe it. I believe in an eye for an eye.
If you don't have normal empathy, you're going to mistreat people because they don't matter. There's an absence of loyalty. The absence of loyalty is a sign of antisocial personality disorder. Loyalty at its best means I care about this person, I value this person, so I will stick by this person. If you have a person without empathy, what you find is that loyalty disappears as soon as the other person crosses them. As soon as somebody says, I'm not with you anymore, or I disagree, it flips from you are the greatest person to you are a horrible person, you are a worthless person, and I will attack you, I will destroy you.
You know, some of the people that were most loyal to me are people that I didn't think would be. Some of the people that were least loyal to me are people that I think I would have treated them differently. I think I would have treated different groups differently. I would have wiped the floor with the guys that weren't loyal, which I will now do, which is great. You know, I love getting even with people. But
you're going to get even with some people.
Yeah, I know, if given the opportunity. If given the opportunity, I will get even with some people that were disloyal to me.
Here comes one of the things they say about you is that there are ticks within you of vindictiveness.
The people who climb to the top by squashing other people, those are what we call a successful sociopath. Sociopaths can be successful. It's because they're con men. If you're a con man, you're convincing them that you are much better, greater, more caring, more honest than you are.
My name is Rick Riley. I'm a golf writer. And I've known Trump for 35 years, maybe. Trump is among our best golfing presidents.
Oh, nice.
For a 72-year-old guy, Trump is a good golfer. He's got a really good, powerful move through the ball, and he hits it a long way. And his putting is good. It's a very wristy, sort of old-school putter. Cheating in golf at all is completely wrong because it's the easiest sport to cheat at. There's no refs, there's no umps. You could cheat every shot if you wanted, but it reveals your character that you don't. Or it reveals your character that you do. And he cheats all the time.
I actually played golf with him with Anthony Anderson one day. Gotcha. And we were all playing together, and we clearly saw him hook a ball into a lake at Trump National in Jersey. And his caddy told him he found it.
You know, people don't know this, but he jerry-rigs his golf carts to go really fast. He has somebody do that. Only one golf cart at every course he owns goes about 30 miles an hour, and that's his. It's number one. Everyone else goes about 15 to 18 miles per hour. So he can hit the ball, zip, he's out. You're still, hey, where's Trump? You hit. By then he can kick the ball, move the ball, take it out of lakes, whatever. There's your ball. Usually you would put a mark down, pick up the ball. What he does, he secretly puts the marker on the end of the putter, and then he looks like he's marking it, but really, now the mark is 3 feet closer. That's a way easier putt. He tried to cheat Tiger Woods in a round of golf once. Tiger freaking Woods. He's off to the right. He's playing against Tiger Woods. They each have a partner. He chunks one flat into the water, splash. He says to his partner, throw me another one they didn't see. I'm like, that's Tiger Woods.
Tiger, we are inspired by everything you've become and attained. The job you've done is incredible.
He's telling people he's won club championships that he didn't even play in. He won a club championship that's being played in Bedminster, New Jersey, when he was playing in Philadelphia. And he said, called in, said, hey, what won the club championship today? And the guy goes, 75, Joe Schmo won it. I shot 73 today, make me the champion. And the pro's like, what? Yeah, make me the champion. I played better here today. So Joe Schmo's name comes off the wall, maybe one of his great moments of his life, and Trump's name goes up. And this has happened over and over again. And then he won at least 6 or 7 times tournaments where he was the only guy playing in the tournament. He'll buy a new golf course, play the first round by himself and Melania, and unless Melania gets hot, he's going to be the winner. And so if you go to any of his courses, his first few years, it's just him because no one else played. As a writer, I love Donald Trump. I loved him because he would say anything. It was like, yeah, I banged Marilyn Monroe and I punched out Sinatra. And we're like, yeah, what else you got? Because he'd say anything. But as an American, I don't like him at all. He terrifies me. If he's going to cheat at golf, you don't think he's going to cheat on his taxes? You don't think he's going to cheat on his wives? You don't think he's going to cheat to win an election? You don't think he's going to cheat to stop an investigation? You don't think he's going to cheat to break rules, to get information from foreign countries? My God, he just admitted he does it.
I'm Bill Kristol. I came to Washington over 30 years ago to work in the Reagan administration. I was chief of staff to the vice president in the George H.W. Bush White House. So I worked in government, worked in some Republican politics, edited the Weekly Standard for a little over 2 decades.
I'm Richard Painter. I'm a law professor at the University of Minnesota. I was the chief White House ethics lawyer for President George W. Bush. Most of my life I was in the Republican Party.
I'm Malcolm Nance, a former U.S. intelligence officer. Started out actually in cryptology, and I'm sort of an expert in all things related to foreign intelligence operations, counterterrorism, and now Russian intelligence activities in the United States.
Wow. What a great looking book. You take some pictures?
The traits that are important in a leader vary, but there are some absolute constants. And the way to look at them is the titles and the core values that we see for each armed service: honor, courage, commitment, country, duty, service above self, excellence in all that we do, always faithful, always prepared. These are some of the core values that we entrust in our national military leaders, and those should be the same core values that we should have in our political leaders.
To be a good leader, a person has to first of all recognize that other people have rights and individualities that you need to take into account. You appreciate who they are and what's important to them. The problem arises in leadership when you have a person who does not appreciate that others are there as independent folks, but who are there to serve you.
We expect leaders to bring people together, to try to unify the country as best they can. The number of attacks that this president is making on Twitter are astronomical, and then the attacks on the media on top of that.
I've never really liked the Trump is an idiot, Trump is a buffoon sort of aspect of the anti-Trump rhetoric, because I think it does diminish more than it should some of the real dangers he poses.
Do you think Donald Trump is fit to serve as commander-in-chief?
No, he's not fit to serve, I think, either by character or judgment. I don't agree with his policies. I don't think he has much experience. He doesn't know how government works. But all that can all be tolerated or survived. But in terms of his just basic character and judgment, his basic sense of putting the country first, at least in key moments. You know, every politician has moments where he cuts corners and watches out for himself or herself. But with Trump, it's the opposite. It's a miracle. I almost think it's a miracle when he actually seems not to simply put his own narrow interests first, and the recklessness and the demagoguery so undercuts democratic norms and sort of constitutional processes that it's dangerous to the country.
Why do they hate his guts? They hate his guts because he represents a threat to their status quo. It's a very weird salad because it doesn't fit in the box of the traditional Republican establishment or the Democratic Party. I mean, he is a reflection of our politically correct society. If I'm not allowed to say what I'm thinking and everyone's got me in a tight box, when I go into the voting booth, I'm going to vote for him. The more politically correct the society is, the greater the reaction formation is of the orange man comes to town.
Why I support Trump is pretty easy. He is the only president in the last probably 40 years that has been for the people.
You know, I had an epiphany at my first Trump rally. I tell people that it was a reconnection to my life because I grew up in a blue-collar situation and I hustled my way to some dough. Went to Tufts and Harvard Law School. I worked at Goldman, built 2 successful hedge fund businesses, started to become independently wealthy. And then what ends up happening is you pick up the collective biases of the people around you. And so you don't really have a good ear to the ground. And so when I got to the first Trump rally, I crossed the security perimeter, went and started talking to people, and I was like, oh my God, Mr. Trump is talking to the people I grew up with. And these are people that are economically desperate. We went from a economically middle class and lower middle class, working class, aspirational society to a desperational society in 35 years. And I can explain what happened through the forces of trade and globalism and our mistakes about repositioning manufacturing away from the United States. All of those things that we did, some of it accidental, some of it intentional, left a very large group of people feeling very, very desperate about their economic aspirations and their well-being. And so that first Trump rally, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of people out here that are in a lot of pain, and I missed it. They have economic anxiety, and they are going to vote to reject the status quo. It's an anger-based vote. And you have to work on policy solutions to fix that. You have to heal that, because when you create a breach in the social fabric of the society, you create a systemic rise of populism, and you get all of these unintended or unexpected political outcomes. I didn't see it myself, but Trump saw it. And so that's something you have to give him credit for. Here is a billionaire, so you'd have to say this is a completely out-of-touch dude, but he saw it, I did not see it, and I grew up with it. So take a step back. We racked up $18 trillion of debt. We killed 1 million people in the Middle East. We wounded 70,000 servicemen and women. 7,000 servicemen and women have died, and 22 are dying a day in the United States from suicide related to post-traumatic stress. Our educational system, K through 12, is completely uneven and broken. Our infrastructure completely failed and broken. We have no industrial policy. There's nobody in the United States as a public servant that has a 10-year plan. They don't even have a 5-year plan. So the American population is looking at the situation and saying, wait a minute, this is not working for me. The stock market crashes and the very big bank is about to go out of business. The government sends them $1 trillion to protect them. What about me? And so people feel that the system is rigged and the system is unfair towards them. You call these people deplorable, white ethnocentrics, white nationalists, or whatever those like knuckle-dragging misnomers, those adjectives of attack on these people, they tune you out. You'd be better served going into those areas of the country and listening to them and saying, hey, you know what? I don't think you're a racist or you're a white trash person. I think you're a person that really just wants your family to have a better life. And as a public servant, I'm going to try to come up with policies that help you do that. David Axelrod said to me, remember, Anthony, people will vote for somebody that they don't like. They gave Richard Nixon a landslide. Nobody liked him. They gave him a landslide. What they don't like doing is they don't like voting for people that dislike them. See the difference? So you're standing at a podium calling people deplorable. They're like, okay, give my vote to the orange man. Let's see how he does.
I think Trump speaks to people in a really very good way. He is appealing to people who are hurt, angry, they feel bypassed, ignored, and not taken seriously. The problem is that he doesn't speak to the humanity of the people who don't agree with him.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
We're building that wall and it's going up very big.
If you have any racism in you, Trump's going to let you bring it out. I get to be a jerk again. I get to be 1956 America again.
It's not a racist. There's not a racist. This guy treats everybody like shit. He is not a racist, okay? It doesn't matter if you're black, white, lesbian, transgender. He treats everybody the same, okay? And he went to Elton John's wedding. He's an asshole. That's different from being a racist. He's obviously an asshole.
It's so sad that so many people have let their worst side come out through Trump.
Get the fuck out of here! Our country, motherfucker! Our country! Don't fucking cook my burrito thing! I love Trump! Fuck you!
Are you racist? I am the least racist person that you have ever met.
Now look at my African American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest? You know what I'm talking about?
I have a great relationship with the blacks. I've always had a great relationship with the blacks.
I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks.
I resisted for quite some time the notion that he is racist. It's more a function of his narcissism than anything else. It's not really racism. That was sort of the way I viewed Trump, that he doesn't like them because they oppose him. And that's really what it's about. It's all a function of his narcissism. And when he kind of says things that were supportive of some of those bad people at Charlottesville, that's again a function of his narcissism, because the people who were attacking those people were attacking him.
You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did.
Russia is our friend. The South will rise again.
You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of statue Robert E. Lee. To them, a very, very important statue.
Will not replace us.
My mother came from the Philippines. She came to the United States in the late 1950s. So I'm half Filipino, and the other half is some mixture of Irish, Scottish, I'm classic American mutt. I think of myself as an American, and I just assume people aren't racist. And I tend to forget that, well, some people are. And that's sort of the lesson with Trump, is I just gave him the benefit of the doubt.
These are people that if they don't like it here, they can leave.
But what he said about those members of Congress, it brought back that memory of the one time I really remember, wow, there really are people like that here. I was with my mother when I was a teenager in a parking lot in Massachusetts, when somebody said to her, "Go back to your country." Sorry. And I found that to be, and it came home to me then. This man is a racist. He is evil.
The Democrat Party is now being led by 4 left-wing extremists who reject everything that we hold dear.
He's a racist, beyond any question.
The first time I saw Trump at a rally telling the crowd that he loved them, but he also hated everybody else, when I saw him leading them in a loyalty oath, using emotions in that way, I realized that this was not politics as usual.
Raise your right hand, everybody. Do you swear that you're going to vote for Donald Trump tomorrow? Raise that hand. I love you. I love you.
He had talked about being president for many, many years with his advisor of the time, Steve Bannon, who is a white nationalist and unabashed racist. Steve Bannon considers himself a student of history, and he likes to think that he knows the cycles of history in terms of resentment and racism, and in this case, he was correct.
This is Italy in 1922. These marching men are charter members of a new Italian political party, the Fascists, founded and led by a flamboyant ex-editor, ex-army corporal, ex-socialist, Benito Mussolini. His movement numbers 1 million members, including uniformed black shirts, and Mussolini successfully forces his leadership on the Italian king and people. Despite the fact that 80% of Italians still support the constitutional monarchy, his threats of violence and revolution win him the office of premier. On his first anniversary, with the aid of gunfire, kidnapping, and castor oil, he is absolute dictator.
At the time Mussolini came on the political scene in 1919, Italy was a limited democracy. People had the vote, women could vote. And Mussolini came in as a revolutionary, as a rabble-rouser, to completely shake things up. One of the most crucial moments of authoritarian capture is when traditional elites invite the authoritarian in the making into power. Fascism was a very violent movement. The political establishment, these traditional conservatives, were so frightened of the continuation of the violence that they actually invited him to become prime minister. He was invited into the office, and they thought that he could be contained and he would kind of do their dirty work, and then they could control him. And tragically, that was not to be. He attacked the press. He attacked democracy as something that wasn't necessary. He joked about having term limits removed. His arch enemy, Giacomo Matteotti, the leader of the Socialist Party, was seen being taken away by fascist thugs. Eventually, his body was found, but it was a huge outrage, and a special investigation was launched with a prosecutor. And in the course of this, Mussolini's career looked like it was over, and he was being asked to resign. And to end this, he declared a dictatorship in January 1925. He changed the special prosecutors. The assassins were given light prison sentences and eventually pardoned, because dictators love to pardon criminals. And Italian society was never the same again. There are times in history when figures appear who are able to coalesce existing hatreds and anxieties that exist in a culture and form from them a movement through rallies, through propaganda, through promises to them.
We will be ending the AIDS epidemic and curing childhood cancer.
Only they know the truth. Only they can fix the problems.
We are finally putting America first.
My name is Cheryl Coos, and I'm a historian of interwar Europe and fascism and authoritarianism. Hitler gained his followers by promising them a better life, a better Germany. But he also had a scapegoat.
Jews as diseased and foreign objects. One of the most dangerous things about authoritarian leaders is that their particular personal quirks, their obsessions, their preoccupations often become state policy.
And I think one of the manifestations of that we've seen in policy is the zero tolerance policy.
Immigration is the fault and all of the problems that we're having. You look at what's happening in Europe, you look at what's happening in other places, we can't allow that to happen to the United States, not on my watch.
This separating of children from parents. Think about the kind of mind that think, I know how we're going to restrict immigration. Let's take their children away. I mean, it's a cruel, almost cartoonishly evil kind of thing to do.
Who's number one with Hispanics? Trump.
It's a violation of human rights to take children away from their parents. To be so uncaring about the permanent effect on these children, and it is going to be permanent, is cruel and sadistic behavior. It's completely different from saying we need to have strong borders or we need to limit immigration or something like that. Those things, if they are worth doing, can be done without destroying children's lives.
The one institution, in my opinion, that hasn't stood up for themselves at all are Congress and the Republican Party.
It's quite extraordinary that the Republican Party, they're slotting right into behavior in Italy in the 1920s and Germany in the early 1930s and so on.
I want to know who's the person that gave the whistleblower, who's the person that gave the whistleblower the information? Because that's close to a spy. You know what we used to do in the old days when we were smart, the spies and treason. We used to handle it a little differently than we do now.
He does not believe in democracy. The way he rules in the White House shows that. It reminded me of something I read by Ivana Trump when he was married to her. And in their divorce proceedings, she had written that he liked reading Hitler's speeches. And Hitler's speeches would always build you up to this crescendo, right, of shouting and repeating things 3 times, because if you repeat something 3 times, it breaks through to the audience and it becomes a fact in their mind.
And I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake, phony, fake. A few days ago, I called the fake news the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
The big lie technique that came from the Nazis, so now we're faced with the same problem. People say over and over and over again something which has never been true. It's a lie, basically, or it may be a prejudice. But when you repeat it, unless it's challenged quickly and effectively, it becomes the norm. It becomes accepted wisdom, even though it's completely wrong.
Repeat everything 3 times, the 3rd time it becomes the truth. He is capitalizing on that.
The authoritarian playbook is a way that these kinds of men capture democracy. After they get power, they proceed to tame the judiciary, they attack the press, and the ultimate aim is to get people to believe that reality is what they say it is.
The fake news, right? The fake news.
They're not about the greater good and calling people to their better angels. They're about fostering a sense of victimization and fear, and how the nation could be purer, and how the nation would be better without X, Y, and Z elements.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
So is it appropriate to compare Trump to Hitler?
I compare Trump to Hitler all the time. And it makes people angry, and I'm not going to stop doing it. And I'll tell you why I'm not going to stop doing it. Because my father was a great historian and student of Jewish history. And he used to say to me all the time, John, the meaning of history is in the Holocaust. We cannot be silent. It's not that he's as bad as Hitler, or that he's the equivalent of Hitler, but he has the same diagnosis as Hitler. He's in the same category, that it's a psychological type that can be more or less extreme, but they share these common characteristics. They're cut from the same cloth. Those of us who have been raised in this current era, we don't realize how spoiled we've been. We've been raised from the World War II boom of prosperity to today, one of the greatest periods of peace and prosperity in human history. And we've also taken it for granted that our democracy was solid, that liberal democracy is now becoming the touchstone for the planet. That's what we believed 3 years ago. But Plato predicted thousands of years ago that democracies always end in autocracy. And we're so naive, we don't understand that every democracy is always vulnerable to being taken over and turned into an autocracy.
We are in the third era of the rise of charismatic, threatening strongmen in history. The first was during the fascist period in the 20s and 30s. After World War II, you had anti-colonial strongmen like Mobutu and Gaddafi. And today, we have a new crop of leaders who are threatening liberal democracy or have already partly destroyed it.
Trump has helped autocrats all around the world almost immediately out of the box. Erdogan in Turkey.
Turkey has the right to eliminate all possible threats to its sovereignty, with or without its allies.
Al-Sisi in Egypt.
Whenever there is a minority trying to impose their extremist ideology, we have to intervene regardless of their numbers.
Even in Libya, they're backing the strongman, al-Haftar.
His most important aim is to take over the capital, of course, because the one who takes over the capital is the one in power.
You have presidents like Bolsonaro in Brazil.
These red outcasts will be banished from our homeland. It will be a cleansing never seen in Brazilian history.
You have strong men in the Philippines like Duterte.
Hitler massacred 3 million Jews. Now, there is 3 million, there's a 3 million Dragari. I'd be happy to slaughter them.
Vladimir Putin.
Это у нас в генах, в нашем генном коде. Это передается у нас из поколения в поколение. Битва за Россию продолжается. Победа будет за нами!
Russia is actually fueling right-wing extremist governments in Europe. They're funding them. AfD in Germany, Alternative for Deutschland. They're the second largest political party in Germany, fueled mainly by hatred of liberalism and immigration. These people are all fellow travelers now. And as fellow travelers, they all believe in the same thing. And they believe that democracy is a failed experiment and that the polar axes of the world should shift. We are in a battle for our political and ideological lives. What was America is now under siege around the world. This is a dangerous, dangerous time for the world. Are we moving to a time where the 1930s have been forgotten and people are viewing it as a template, not a warning?
The only way we can perpetuate a democracy is by people sharing those values and thinking that that is something to be upheld.
I mean, Trump is a symptom of a lot of things, including a rise of a kind of ethno-nationalism and authoritarianism, but he's a symptom who's become a very important cause. If the United States is standing against ethno-nationalist sentiments and authoritarian regimes around the world, I think that puts a certain amount of check on them. With the American president on their side, it's a kind of exponential shot in the arm for them and an exponential weakening of liberal democracy around the world.
I actually go back to, believe it or not, chimpanzees. You know, when Jane Goodall was observing chimpanzees, you know, one of the things she showed us is how loving they were, you know, and how human they were. And she bonded with them and formed these relationships with them. And then the males would compete for dominance. You know, they'd pound their chest and they'd throw dirt up in the air and they'd throw heavy rocks into the river to show who was more powerful. But no one ever really got hurt. It was all called display behavior, just to sort of show who was the toughest, and that person would become the alpha. What happened, though, after many years is that troop that she observed became so big that they split into two troops. So everything she taught us about chimpanzees is really what we would call within-group behavior. It says nothing about between-group behavior. Once the troops had split apart, a very aggressive, charismatic alpha male from one of the groups would start beating his chest and hooting and slapping the other males and getting them excited, and then he would start marching towards the other group's territory, and the other males would follow him. And they would wait at the edge of the territory for another male, maybe even someone they were friends with, when the troop was one troop. And they will barrel down the hill and beat that male to death. And they'll do that systematically until they're able to take over the other group's females and their land. Now think about this from an evolutionary point of view. Whose genes got to move on? The troop with the malignant narcissistic leader said, let's go kill all the other chimpanzees. So this is very deep in our genetic programming. And this is why demagogues like Trump are able to be successful. Because before Trump, we had fractures in our society, but we had this overarching identity as Americans. Donald Trump fractures it and says, no, we're actually two troops. And our troop is being attacked by that troop. And if we don't go over there and beat the crap out of them, they're going to destroy us. And that is like a siren song to the deep genetic programming in the base of our animal brains that, yes, if somebody convinces us that other troop is trying to kill us, and I don't care how bad my leader is, but he's the one who's leading us to the edge of the troop, so only one of us is going to survive. Who cares if he's a liar? We want to survive. And the only way we survive is by attacking those other people. That primitive programming is actually not atypical. They're not anomalous. They're not unusual. Humankind has been at war in every place at every time, right? And they've been horrible to, in war, to burning down villages, raping women, torturing people, killing people. That's actually normal for the human animal, unfortunately. It's the psychology of power. We all tend to fall behind the powerful leader out of self-preservation and out of group preservation. It's the natural instinct.
What are you most fearful of about this president being in control?
Nuclear war. I mean, that's the long term. I mean, that's the biggest risk, is that he gets in a confrontation with a foreign leader, North Korea, or with China, where his ego's on the line.
Several months ago, a foreign policy expert on the international level went to advise Donald Trump. And 3 times he asked about the use of nuclear weapons. 3 times he asked, at one point, if we have them, why can't we use them?
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
A president of the United States, even if he's being a showman, saying that we will bring fire and fury to your country, that is an implicit nuclear threat. Donald Trump does not have the temperament to be around these systems.
Welcome to the White House. This ceremony and the treaty we're signing today are both excellent examples of the rewards of patience.
It was 1987, and President Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev celebrated the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty as calming Cold War tensions. The INF scrapped thousands of ground-launched nuclear and conventional missiles with ranges of from 300 to 3,400 miles.
Moscow and Washington have repeatedly accused each other of violating the treaty, a deal that helps to protect the security of the US and its allies in Europe and the Far East. Russia has condemned President Trump's intention to withdraw from the pact, The Deputy Foreign Minister saying it would be a very dangerous step.
The President of the United States is a nuclear monarch. He is a king. There are no safeguards other than his whim that determines when he launches an atomic bomb and where. The briefcase that he has, the football, is a communications device. And all it does is authenticates him to the nuclear arsenal's chain of command.
Unlock code entered. Juliet, Papa.
And it executes his order once he has authenticated himself.
Mark. T-minus 50.
Not one bomb's going. Multiple bombs are going. So when you choose that option, that missile will blow that country up in 35 minutes. And there is no turning it off. Once they boost into space, they're gone.
The president has the authority to order a nuclear attack, including a first strike, and it is extremely unlikely that the military command would not take his orders.
The president can decide that France is a national security threat, and he can order an ICBM strike.
That's not the correct procedure.
Screw the procedure. I want somebody on the goddamn phone before I kill 20 million people.
Sir, we have a launch order.
3.
Put your hand on the keys,
2,
sir.
1. Launch.
So what do you say to people who say that Trump is a bluffer, he's a strategic thinker, he won't do this? Are you willing to bet your children's life on that? Are you willing to bet the lives of every person in this nation on that? And if you're willing to say that about any person who will pathologically lie to you, to your face, documentable, quantifiably lie to you, your wife, your children on a daily basis, then you don't really understand what the stakes are. We cannot allow that kind of gamesmanship to continue. This man controls those weapons.
I don't think you can understand Trump or much else of what's going on in the world today without factoring in the effects of death anxiety. Are we doing what we're doing for the reasons that we claim? Or could there be something that lurks beneath the surface of consciousness? In The Denial of Death, Becker argues that it is our awareness that we will inevitably die and our inability to accept the reality of the human condition with grace and courage that underlies almost all human activity. What Freud pointed out is that we're animals, and we don't like that. We're breathing pieces of defecating meat that aren't any more significant or enduring than lizards or potatoes. So if you think about it, I'm going to die, I could walk outside and get smote by a comet. You wouldn't be able to stand up in the morning. You would literally be overwhelmed by paralyzing existential terror. What we do to bury that anxiety is to embrace belief systems that life has meaning and we have value. In a single word, culture. So the prevailing belief in the U.S. in the last century is that, America's the home of the free and the brave. Anybody who works hard enough can be just as successful as Oprah or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, that we will always be the world's foremost economic as well as military power. And so, one of the first knees in our psychological groin was 9/11, when both our military and economic power had been challenged. Then we get clobbered with the recession, combined with globalization, combined with demographic reality that by the middle of the century, white people will be in the minority. And so for many Americans, their worldview have been completely upended. So fast forward to 2015, Donald Trump declares that he's running for president. He comes down the escalator. He's like, Mexicans are rapists. I'm going to keep you safe. And I said to myself, that guy's going to win.
The American dream is dead. But if I get elected president, I will bring it back bigger and better and stronger than ever before, and we will make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
When the psychological shit hits the fan, if you'll pardon the expression, and when people are economically and psychologically insecure, when somebody comes along and confidently proclaims in very simple terms that they will keep them safe, they will make them prosper, they will bring back the good old days, that's the psychological hook. If you look at it, from a detached perspective, we're really at a crossroads. The impending environmental apocalypse, juxtaposed with simmering ethnic tensions, juxtaposed with rampant economic inequality. And here we have Trump magnifying all of those difficulties. What Trump also did masterfully was to take non-existent problems and render them potentially traumatic by grotesquely overemphasizing the danger. Once you get on board psychologically, once you commit to a demagogish ideologue, that puts up a fact-proof screen between you and the world. Once you are fully on board, there's no rational argument that will alter your opinion. There is always a tendency for charismatic leaders to bring out the tribal nature of humans. It is very easy to lapse into an us versus them mentality. Rationality will lose every time.
Where is the red line? Where do you say, okay, hey, no mas, I'm not supporting this guy anymore? Where is the line? So it's obviously been crossed by many people, but for me, the line would be when you look at our documents and you look at our Constitution, North Korea, Russia, Venezuela has the exact same language. Go look at their Constitution. They have the same flowery language related to human rights and all of that stuff. But what makes us unique is the checks and balances and the power diffusion in the construction of the government. So if Trump starts to trample on that, then I'm going to turn on him. Have to. You can't disrupt a 243-year experiment for one dude's personality.
It has now been a week since the Centers for Disease Control confirmed the first community transmission of coronavirus in the United States.
We all have personalities. Some people are more dependent. Some people are more aggressive. It becomes pathological when you see the whole world through a screen that makes everything fit your need.
Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus.
It's not just being manipulative. It's a fundamental inability to not be that way.
In this big, vast land of ours, this great country of ours, we have 240 cases. Most of those people are going to be fine.
Donald Trump doesn't care about experts.
You also weigh in on this issue of hydroxychloroquine. What do you think about this, and what is the medical evidence?
Yeah. Maybe 15 times.
He only cares about people who will tell him what he already wants to hear. He makes himself ignorant about almost everything because he only wants to hear what he wants to hear.
We have it so well under control. I mean, view this the same as the flu. When somebody sneezes, I mean, I try and bail out as much as possible. And I haven't touched my face in weeks. In weeks. I miss it.
And one of the most devastating things he's been doing is to emotionally train Americans not to care about others, to extinguish compassion and extinguish kindness in themselves. He terms it being tough.
He is giving people a license to hate, to provide a source of anger, to go after each other. How are we all tolerating this? Loyalty is not blind obedience unless you're supporting a demagogue, okay? And so you don't want to ever be like that in your life.
Relax. We're doing great.
The Dow is now down nearly 900 points.
Economists have been ramping up their projections.
The virus spreading explosively, like, quote, a bomb.
To be president, you have to exercise good judgment on behalf of the American people for their interest.
They have to go back to work. Our country has to go back. Our country is based on that. I think it's going to happen pretty quickly.
It's got nothing to do with the safety of the people. It's about him. It's not about the country.
He spent a lot of time on Twitter today boasting about the excellent television ratings his news conferences have received lately.
We have Monday Night Football type ratings, and that these are like Bachelor finale.
He's not fit because he is unable to think. He can only react and attack.
What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's really bad reporting.
He is unfit to be president because he cannot think.
The U.S. is surpassing Italy as the country with the most fatalities.
He says he wants to reopen the country with a big bang.
Pursuing truth is to the mind like food is to the body. Without pursuing truth, your psyche starves. And Trump's psyche has been starving for a long time.
Say, sir, what metrics you will use to make that decision?
The metrics right here. If we can hold that down between 100 and 200,000, we all together have done a very good job. I am very proud to be your president. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
He's detached from reality. I mean, this is just demented.
The Founding Fathers always knew that a king-like tyrant would try to rule as a personal dictator and use the powers of the presidency to enhance or enrich himself. But they never foresaw the Senate and the judiciary might completely abdicate their responsibilities and go along with that.
The natural tendency of history in many ways is towards greater liberalism and altruism. But human nature has these competing forces. And so what we're seeing now is this amazing regression, right? From where we were, we are literally going backwards, I think, a century or two. We all have to do everything that we can do because our society is at risk and we could lose it all. We could lose this grand experiment in democracy. I think we're more than halfway there. I think people don't realize how far this has actually progressed.
When you're in a period of rising authoritarianism, it's very easy to get exhausted because the news comes at you like bullets from a machine gun, all of it bad. One of the best weapons against authoritarianism is protests in the street. And protests are key because not only does the leader see that he's unpopular, but even more important, his allies see that the public is actually against them.
Think of what you tell your kids. You tell them to be honest. You tell them to tell the truth. You tell them, don't think of yourself. Don't brag. Don't trash other people to make yourself feel good. How can you support Donald Trump? How can you support somebody who essentially violates all of the things that we want them to follow? It makes no sense. It's corrosive for them, it's corrosive for you, and it's corrosive for the country.
This is a phenomenal country. It's one of the most unique historical experiments in the 5,500 years of recorded history. We have to figure out a way to help people and bring them into the new world of globalization. They have to feel like they're part of the aspirational success of America that our parents felt.
I believe at our best that we have the capacity to radically reconceptualize who we are and the extent to which that we can accept our commonality as human beings. I think therein lies the key, because then there's no one left to hate, and that's not going to stop us from hating. But as Ernest Becker put it, maybe we can hate stuff that we should, like poverty and injustice, and maybe we can then use righteous indignation to everybody's best interest.